Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another installment of NewsNow's podcast. We are dealing with federal election candidates, and right now I've got the pleasure of having Mr. Dean Allison sitting across from me, the Conservative candidate for Niagara West. Dean, you've been around a long time, but maybe you could just start with giving a bit of background on yourself and how long you've served the riding and, some information that tells people about you.
Yeah, so who am I, right?
Yes, sir.
If you've moved into the community, you're new, you may not have a clue. I moved into the community back in 92 where I opened up a restaurant in Beamsville, and I bought it in 95 and then moved to the area in 2000. Ran first time unsuccessfully in 2000. And then after that, between 2000 and 2004, as a business owner in the area, I was a member of the Chamber of Commerce. I ended up becoming the president of the Lincoln Chamber of Commerce. I was president of the West Lincoln Memorial Hospital Foundation. The first fundraising, we raised almost $12 million. And so I think I don't know what the nut is now, maybe 50 million or something. I'm not 100% sure, but
I believe 60.
So 60 million. So we've got...
Oh, it was 60 and it was reduced. Sorry, I forget the number. It was
okay,
reduced.
let's say it's 50 million.
Yes.
So 12 million is money that with the community I was able to help raise. And the one thing I love about this community, people are super generous. It's not just the hospital. It could be the McNally House. The list goes on and on, the YMCA, all these other kinds of things. So I had a chance as the president of the Chamber of Commerce, as the president of the West Lincoln Memorial Hospital Foundation, to get to know a ton of people in the community and realize that our community is very generous. And politics aside, I mean, the only thing I've ever seen unite a community in that kind of way is the hospital. And while I was here as a business person, prior to them saving the hospital, I wasn't living in the community. I was living in Oakville, and I know because I read in the paper of the thousands of people that showed up to save the hospital. And so here we are, 17 years later, finally getting the hospital. I think that's great. So I've always taken great pride in this community. I love the community. And it's what I call home. I used to live in Beamsville. I moved recently to Pelham, and so that's where I spend my time now. And as I said, the last 17 years I've held a variety of positions. I chaired the Foreign Affairs Committee, the Human Resources Committee. I've chaired the Public Accounts Committee. I've been Shadow Minister for Trade. I've been Shadow Minister for a number of different things.
Well, you were first elected? You mentioned 2000, but then what year?
So first time I got elected was actually 2004.
Okay.
And then that was a minority government in 2006, another minority government in 2008, another minority. Oh my goodness, this will be the 8th election. So it's certainly been an honor to serve the people of Niagara West, and I'm very grateful for it every day. Never take it for granted, and I realize that it's truly a great opportunity to represent people in the riding in Ottawa.
Great. Okay, so let's get into some issues. First, I just wanted to say what, you've been out knocking on doors, I'm sure. What are you hearing in Niagara West as, say, the key one or two concerns of people today, right now?
COVID is something I think people are hoping that we're moving past. So that's always the underlying thing, right? The last year and a half has been incredibly difficult for a lot of people. And I was never in favor of lockdowns. And the reason is that there are too many small business people that were getting crushed. At the end of the day, when you tell someone their business is not essential, listen, I'm going to beg to differ. You've got a hairdresser who has got to pay her mortgage. She has got to pay rent on her store. She's got to put food on her table. And you tell her job's not essential. I'm going to tell you that her family probably will disagree with that. So I was never in favor of lockdowns. Obviously, everything we do should be safe. I get that. That goes without saying. But we have to realize that people really struggled and suffered the last couple of years. Mental health has never been higher. So I don't have people calling me up and saying, listen, mental health is an issue, but I know from talking to people, in talking to people like Grimsby Benevolent Fund, Village of Hope, a number of these food banks, that the needs skyrocketed. The needs huge. I talked to Village of Hope recently and asked them, how many families did you have pre-COVID as part of your group, and how many families do you have now? And basically the numbers were approximately 200 before and just under 400 now. Think about that, almost doubled for the need. And the challenge is, we do a lot of things in Niagara, but we do have a large service industry for sure, hospitality, tourism, and other stuff. And that industry has been rocked like no other industry here.
Well,
in Niagara.
we'll get to the economy.
Sure.
But I recognize it is tied to COVID. But if you want,
Yeah,
because I want to get on to passports too.
Okay, we'll talk about
So
that.
I don't mean to cut you off. Go
So
ahead.
even though COVID is not coming up, it does come up, right? Because it's
Connected
everything.
to everything.
It's
Every
everything we
facet
do.
of life, yeah.
So that's the first thing for sure. The second thing is when I talk to employers, it's struggling to get employees. There's a real shortage of workers right now. We're going to talk about that right in a little bit, and then I would say that when it comes to dropped on us in the middle of this election, Doug Ford announced a vaccine passport, and so I've gotten all kinds of calls, and my phone has lit up over that particular issue. So I would say those three things have been definitely what I'm hearing a lot of. I mean, the economy is always important. If you had a job where you could work from home, you were laughing, right? There's a lot of people. If I look at most, let's be honest, all levels of government, municipal, provincial, and federal, none of them missed a beat. They all got a check. They could work from home, but that wasn't the same with small businesses around. And if you worked at a big business, like it wasn't where you had to physically touch stuff. Like you have a desk job in Toronto, you could probably actually work from home, and that made a huge difference. So I really feel, depending on where you were in the economy, depending on how you fared on this on the last 18
Even just
months.
the place you're working. If you were in the right spot, there's businesses that are making out like gangbusters,
Absolutely.
and others are completely crushed and gone with a stiff wind.
And also, I'll tell you, in terms of lockdowns, another thing. Remember, we live in a fairly rural riding. I mean, Grimsby.
It's considered rural for sure.
It's considered rural, but I mean, it's not high densification yet compared to what it is in pockets in Toronto. So when you're talking to people that live in subdivisions with backyards and front yards and decks versus the city, I get the dynamics totally different. You got some single mothers or single fathers or single people living in a condo that may or may not have a balcony during that time of lockdown. So the mental health issues for them versus what it would be for here in a mostly rural riding would be considerably different. So when I use that context, when I talk to friends in here in Bruce, say Owen Sound area, whatever the case would be, and they had very few cases of COVID, and yet they were treated the same as downtown Toronto, they're scratching their head saying, I don't understand what that means. So all that stuff mattered in that context, and I think at the end of the day, depending where you were living, what you were doing for work made a huge difference in terms of your level of stress.
So in your answer there, you mentioned, and Pat mentioned CERB in passing, and I know from, whether it's my DIA hat here in Grimsby or just dealing with clients for any shape or form of advertising need through the paper, almost every business I know is looking for people.
Absolutely.
Whether it's service, retail, restaurants, for sure. All the restaurants within 150 yards of this building are looking for people, 2 or 3 people today. And I know one restaurant doesn't open on Monday or Tuesday because they can't find anybody. They don't want to stretch their staff that thinly. So they're actually closed because they don't have the people to open. Now my understanding is CERB runs through the end of October. It was initially extended. I'm not sure if it got extended again.
So I'm not exactly sure of the time. I know it's going to run till at least through the end of the election, right? So
my question there is, does CERB need to be, people will say, oh, it's not necessarily CERB. Maybe people are concerned about their health. And from my experience, that's not the reason people are staying on CERB. They're, a lot of people are taking the money and running to some degree. But, does the administration or the criteria of CERB need to be tweaked to, make it a usable tool where needed, because you don't want anybody to be without where they need it. But it's also limiting the economy getting going. What do you think about that?
So just a couple of things. First of all, in the beginning it was needed. There's no question. You're shutting people out and they're not able to work. You need to provide some opportunity. And so early days, definitely. We're now gone on. We've got vaccination rates up. A lot of positive things have happened. And so now we need to be looking at transitioning, getting people back to work. And so, one of the things that we promised in the budget is to help businesses with 50% of new hires. So once again, people aren't working now. We need to try and get them back as programs run out. So once again, just renewing the program all the time and not considering the needs of individuals and businesses is not a good thing. We need to look at all things. I mean, we have to do it safely. That's what the focus has been on. I think governments have done a good job on that, and I think we need to continue. Not only hospitality and retail and tourism, but the other issue has been in our farm sector. So I can't tell you how many farmers have called me up and said, Dean, I can't get people to come and work on the farm, and there's a challenge with the temporary foreign workers.
Universal.
Right? And there's a problem with the temporary foreign workers program where we can't get bodies in. They got to go through the same process. It's very complicated, and you got to advertise and all these other... Listen, in talking to farmers, if they could hire local people, there's no question in my mind they would hire local people. Because if you hire from abroad, you've got to find the people, you've got to pay for their plane tickets, you've got to house them, you've got to feed them. So it's much more
Are they still having to quarantine when they come? And I'm not sure what the policy is with...
Yeah, I mean...
I know last summer there was an issue with that.
Well, because things were moving. They kept changing kept changing the goalposts. So,
sure.
Yeah, I would say if they're probably double vaxxed, that's not an issue. But they're probably more than likely... have to do a test and probably and even people coming, it was just very complicated and it didn't really work well. So this is a problem. And now I also talk, so if you don't plant your food, right, you don't get it then you have a problem harvesting. So I feel in the future, if we don't deal with that issue specifically, we're going to end up with challenges in terms of our food security, because people are going to end up saying, well, we couldn't get it in the ground. And I talk to farmers right now, right during the last few weeks, say, like, I don't have the staff to help me harvest, and the fruit and food maybe fall to the ground, which is not going to be good. So we have major issues around that, and part of what we would do, specific policies around that, was that we pay 50% for the next 6 months once the programs run out for rehiring new people, right? Get them back to work. And the second thing we would do is we would also try and streamline the process of temporary foreign workers for our agriculture community to help them. We need to get people in. Obviously, if you can hire locals, Canadians, you always want to do that. And that's what farmers always try to do. And there's always a shortage. And we go through this year after year, and they go through this lengthy, complicated process. And what it ends up happening is that we're in jeopardy of not being able to secure our food system here because we either don't get it in the ground or we aren't able to harvest it. So those are two.
And there's a long history there that goes back pre-COVID.
Absolutely, and it was a problem before, but it's even been tougher since then.
Oh, it's been magnified.
So those are two specific things, under narrow tool government we would do to help. And there's many more we can discuss, whatever, but two specific things that would help businesses in our area.
Now you mentioned there about workers coming into the country and such, and one of the questions that I'm going to be asking all the candidates relates to the passport issue. And if you go back a couple of weeks in Ontario, Ford called Trudeau out on that basis because he thought there should be a federal level or bar of guidelines for what falls under passport criteria and uses. And nothing transpired, and so then they pulled the trigger and created whatever they created in Ontario. But do you think that when you mentioned about people coming in and out of the country, and some people have to be quarantined, some people aren't, and you get into your issue of not mandatory, what's the word for workers, like vital workers? It's not
essential.
Yes. So again, there's different criteria and what fits, what square peg fits through a round hole. So would it have not been beneficial to have one level bar of criteria on a national scale?
Yeah. So I'm not in favor of a vaccine passport, and I'll tell you why. There's a couple things, and you mentioned a couple different things there.
A lot of moving parts. There's no simple answer to
Let's talk about the first one, essential. What's essential work? We've got a company here in Grimsby, handling specialty. They do work all over the world. They're world renowned. They do a lot of great things.
We just had Tom Beach in here 2 weeks ago.
Okay, so Tom, I know Tom. We've tried to work through some of these issues and these situations. Let's just say he's got a dozen guys out on the road that are installing, they're fixing, they're doing whatever they do, right?
Yeah.
They got major projects with major companies all over the world. What they do, because they're in food, they're in energy, all these things, they're deemed essential. Well, the challenge is that if you ask Tom when his workers come back, he may have 6 people who are met at border services, and those 6 people will say, yep, you're essential, you can go home and go to work tomorrow. The other 6 can show up at the border, and the border service agent can say, I don't believe you're essential, and we need you to quarantine for 2 weeks. Yeah. That blows me away. That's an issue. And we're a border town, right? So the reality is, there's a lot of us that used to go over to football games and hockey games and, Ellicottville, whatever. You go over shopping. What do you do? We live in borders. None of that's happened for 18 months. No one's been able to drive over to see a football game. No one's been able to drive over to do anything. And people own properties here.
I was going to say, I know people that have property.
Right? Yeah. People own properties here. Americans own properties here. Yep. Certainly along Lake Erie is one example. And then we have got a number of people that own property. So all of a sudden here, you've created this crazy system that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I support testing, rapid testing, all these kinds of things, because we want to be safe. So why is it that we can say some people can rapid test or PCR test, whatever they're going to decide it is? Why is it that we can say that some people should be able to be fine with that and nobody else can be? So right now, the way it works, if you're double vaxxed as an American or as a Canadian, you could come back. You still got to take a test, which makes sense. Are you, what the best information we have, are you actually COVID free? That's what we want to figure out. And if you pass the test, then you're good to go. So I'm confused always by why the fact is that we've got all these different standards and different levels at the end of the day. We all agree that we should keep everyone safe. I think rapid tests is a great way to go. And so incidentally, what our party policy is that if we look at that, Aaron has said, we believe that you should be able to take a rapid test. Now, Trudeau's saying you can't even get on a plane. I don't buy that. And a lot of my constituents are calling me on a regular basis and don't buy that. I support them on that issue. When it regards to an international system, which is what you mentioned as well, what Aaron has said of the Conservative policy is that if there's going to be an international system...
And to clarify, you mean Aaron O'Toole.
Aaron O'Toole, sorry, yeah, exactly. I'm a little too casual about that. So the Conservative Party's platform, and Aaron O'Toole, is that if there's going to be an international system, then we should try and figure out for people that want to be able to participate in that, we need to...
Well, that's what I'm saying about having a national scale policy. You've got to... If the world is building square peg holes, you got to build a square peg.
Right. So I agree with that. Where I don't agree is on the provincial level. Now, that's not my jurisdiction. So
no, but it was left provincially. That was the point of my question.
Well, exactly. But the point is you've got a couple provinces that have it, some that don't, maybe some that is coming as far as that goes. But all of a sudden restaurants were essential in the first stage, but now they're not.
But workers don't have to have a shot, but you have to have one to go in.
So so it changes. It's all over the place. So I believe. Listen, we need to keep people safe. No one's ever not said that, and I think that we need to move forward on that. I think we just need to be consistent. And I am telling you what I'm hearing.
But would a national policy on it? Would that not allow an equal footing of safety for all?
Yes, but I don't think it should be. There should be a mandatory vaccine passport. So, I think if it's optional and businesses want to opt in and do it to make it whatever, I think that would be.
Well, then you end up with the arguments on main streets because one person is implementing a policy at a local, which happens now. Like, I can't tell you again.
For sure. And guess what? Guess who's got to implement this stuff? Yeah. Local businesses. That's not right. How does that? They're going to make them. And so we've got
even with the Niagara region stuff and restaurants.
And so what are they going to do? They're going to force the businesses to do it. And if they don't comply or they miss it, they're going to be fined.
Big fine.
That doesn't make sense to me. That's not fair.
I don't want to get sidetracked on it. It's easy to do. But you mentioned about a few different things about COVID and policies and treatments and stuff. So one question I need to ask you, and the whole purpose of these discussions is not to take pieces of information from other interviews and make them debate because of the seriousness of a comment of a previous interview with the Liberal candidate. He mentioned that you had suggested, I believe he said he saw it in a story. Now, but you had mentioned something about ivermectin as, I don't even want to take what he said out of context. Maybe if you could just describe whatever you said related to ivermectin, and explain. I'm just going to leave it at that because I don't want to misconstrue or misinterpret for you what the comment was. But you just
I'd be more than happy to. So some misleading stories in newspapers, and so what happened was I posted an article online that had.
He did say it was social media. Yes.
So I posted an article online that talked about a scientist doing some work around the product ivermectin, and we'll say this is some work. And my comments were I would encourage the government to look at early stage interventions. That I don't could care less about any type of. I want something that works, and we need to look at early stages. We need to look at some. So right now we have a vaccine that works well, and quite frankly, if you catch COVID, you either beat it or you don't beat it. Like there's no medication for it. There is a number of things that are under development right now. Some of it's new, some of it's been around for a while. I encourage the government to look at all options and figure out what makes some sense. And as I said, never once suggested. So it's very misleading. It was misleading in the newspaper it was in, and it was misleading by the candidate what he said. What I'm encouraging is a discussion around what can we find. So I pulled down the social media post because that was not my intent. My intent was not to look at trying to encourage one thing or the other. And I'm going to repost something, probably this weekend, talking about the fact that, vaccines are the best bet. They're going to keep you the safest and be better for you if you end up catching COVID. You won't have it as seriously. But at the same time, I think we're going to encourage medicine to still be developed. And I don't think anyone would disagree with that. So I'll make sure there's no picture next time when that happens.
There's no mention of a picture. But
there's no mention. There was only the picture, right? So anyways, that's all good.
Fair enough.
Hey, it's political. It's politic times. I get it. People are going to want to torque things, and there are certain papers that torque things around here. So,
and depending on what side of the fence you're on, some people would point that finger in this direction. But you do the best you can. So another area, we're talking about legislation and things like that. And Lincoln has had an extensive issue going back a long time. Well, not a long time, but since the start of the cannabis issue. And, we've dealt with many stories through town of Lincoln and covering council, and with residents calling us from Jordan and Vineland in particular, but other areas as well. But those seem to be the hot spots for just significant odor issues, blanketing huge areas, ruining people's use of their homes. And the consensus was from both the municipality and from residents that there was no guideline or no mechanism to deal with it, either at Niagara Health or the province of Ontario or the federal government, Health Canada. What's your, and I know people have called you because I know people have called Sam and everybody. So what's your dealings with that issue been? How would you characterize its state today? And would you get your government, if you got to form a government, how would you deal with that?
Yeah, so this all goes back to previous Liberal governments that actually put in place the ability you could grow your own, right? That was all part of the process. The challenge has been is there were people cobbling licenses together, right? So I get your license and his license and
like eggs,
right?
To some degree,
absolutely. So what happens is, but then I overproduce, and I call these things co-op grow-ops, right? They're kind of legit, but they're not legit. And then
they push the envelope.
We stopped all that stuff. We stopped issuing personal licenses, and we set a higher standard for commercialization. And so the only thing that's was available and is still available is the commercialization piece. But even with that, we've had problems with odor, right? That's been one of the issues. And so we have to distinguish between the two. One is legit, like the commercial piece, and we could do better. And the other one's not, like, it doesn't, there's no standards. There could be fire issues. Like, there's a whole bunch of a raft of issues. I've been on this issue nonstop, and we've talked, because we've had issues in Pelham. We've had issues in Grimsby.
Again, it's pretty universal.
Lincoln. It's been in every section of Waynfleet. Every
all
jurisdiction.
depends which way the wind blows.
Absolutely. Well, and mostly it's coming from west to east, right? So if you're downwind, you're gonna see that. So we've worked with a number of I've talked to police officers. We've had meetings and advisory groups have formed in different towns and all that kind of stuff. And we reached out to the cannabis directorate, and we were getting nothing, absolutely nothing. And so my chief of staff emailed. He went on it's called GEDS. It's where all the federal employees are listed, and he emailed every single person in the department, like in the whole directorate, and then we got a response. But the reality is the response has been pathetic, and we need to do more. We formed a group, conservatives, where we've written letters to the minister, we've written letters to the ministry, and to try and deal with this issue. And the crazy thing is, the Liberals have done nothing about this. So I am always entertained when I hear my Liberal counterpart talk about this issue like he would fix it. His government actually created the issue, and his government's actually done nothing about it. And what we did was we stopped the personal licenses, giving those out. We commercialized the process, and what we need to go back and look at is the commercialized, like the whole issue around the smell. We've got to figure that out. But the second thing is, the Liberal Party legalized this. Cool. But they didn't give municipalities a chance to get ready. And
there was no tools.
A lot of this is dealt with bylaws. I mean, I can't build a shed on my property unless I get A, B, and C, and D done. But somehow people are allowed to have grow ops everywhere. So the challenge was, in the beginning, municipalities were not ready, did not have the tools, did not understand. They didn't have they had nothing in place. Now they're starting to get caught up, right? Some townships are much more advanced. Other ones are still struggling. But at the end of the day, if they tell you where you can build your shed, I'm sure they can tell you where you can build a grow up.
Yeah, they can tell you where to build it, but they can't. There's no mechanisms for order. There's basic nuisance bylaws, but you get into interpretation and who's going to foot the legal bill for all that stuff.
But I think one of the things we can do is we can have them look at it. And I've talked to some of these commercial units, and they want to be good neighbors. Some of them do, some of them don't care.
Yeah. And if they don't have to,
but they're going to do what the law says.
Yes.
Right? It's like they're only going to do the bare minimum.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
How is it before this? Before it was all legal, sometimes you wouldn't know where pot was because they had it all figured out. Now all of a sudden, that's legal. We know where it is everywhere.
Well, because it's penetrated residential neighborhoods.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure.
But to me, I'm not running. But the simplest thing would have been when they created the legislation, if they didn't allow businesses to buy existing greenhouses and grandfather all the planning principles from when that went in. If they all had to have charcoal filtered sealed buildings, et cetera, regardless of whether they bought an existing one or not, then every grow up would at least be on the same level.
Well, that and the other thing, I agree, because the commercial standards are up here, and they
depending if you buy an existing thing, you have the doors open.
Right.
You have a nice
so that's an issue, number
through.
one. And number two, there should be a mechanism where they're actually reviewing the legislation on an ongoing basis. What's working? What is it? Oh, we got a problem with odor? Then we need to change it. Businesses do that all the time. Towns come in and say, hey, by the way, this is what you could do for a septic last year. The standards have been raised and your septic bed now changed. So we do it in our houses all the time. Why wouldn't we do it for commercial facilities when it comes to cannabis?
So what, just to get away from the questions I've been asking though, what are you hearing at the door? I asked that question earlier, but we got kind of on one track and never went back to it. For local issues or things that are concerned in our fishbowl here in Niagara West, what do you
I think the two, and I kind of mentioned them quickly, but definitely vaccine passports my phone has been ringing off the hook for that. Okay, number one. And then I would say the second thing has been certainly access to labor for small businesses. So businesses, people are, make it work. I don't think they tend to, they don't complain a lot. Like they just try and get their job done. They try and fix it and figure it out. So I would say those are two of the things. And then the third thing, I had a lot of people early on very upset with the early election call, like why are we doing it? There's a mandate. That doesn't last for a long time, but it was there for a couple of weeks. Obviously, Afghanistan. We have the candidate Namir, who's is a great guy. I got a lot of time for Namir, smart guy, NDP. We chatted early on, and I know that he's got family members that are over there, and I don't want to tell his story. That's up to him. And we reached out to the minister to try and figure this stuff out. Nothing at all. And so he's not the only one I've heard from. I've heard from a number of families in Niagara West that have family members in Afghanistan that are concerned about getting them out, and that's a big issue, right? Because we knew this was coming. It was announced, and then overnight, it seemed like Kabul fell, and all of Afghanistan was taken over by the Taliban. And so my question is, how are we getting these people out? I mean, so that's only an issue if it's important to you and your family, but I'm still hearing it from Afghanis that are living in Niagara West, and that's certainly an issue that's near and dear to the mayor's heart.
Okay. So. I'm noting that I'm not being rude, because if someone sees just one of these, they'll think, why is Mike checking his phone in the middle? But as explained before we started, other candidates were asked to submit a question if they chose. So I have a question from the Liberal candidate for you. It simply says, what has Mr. Allison done for the riding? What has he done for our riding specifically? So and that's all the question says.
Do I only have 4 minutes for this? Is that all no? Listen, so first of all, I've been a community guy, since I've been here as a business person for the number of years I've been here. I talked about my involvement with the Chamber of Commerce and my involvement with the hospital. Always, that goes back a number of years. In terms of being here, I mean, one of the great things I love doing is working with small business people. I love the constituency work. We have literally thousands and thousands of people. We're not in government right now. We haven't been for the last 6 years. A little bit tougher getting money when you're in opposition. But a number of projects that I helped I fought very hard for. Water treatment plant here in Grimsby, major upgrade. Some people would say that's a good thing. Some people a bad thing, because it's obviously helped facilitate all the development on the north in the North Service Road there. Town hall, YMCA. The arena and beams. So there's a ton of things that have happened. One of the most significant things that have happened for the wine industry here in Canada, and we've got a lot of wineries, over 50. I don't know if there's another riding that has as
just
many.
This riding, yeah,
has got as many wineries. I mean, if we had 80 or 90 wineries in Niagara, we've got the bulk of them here in Niagara West. I proposed a private members bill back in 2005 and for excise tax. And what happened was that our Minister Flair at the time, when we became in government in 2006, that was the first thing in the budget, the first thing. And so imagine removing excise tax. It's to the tune of $40 or $50 million a year for wineries all over the country, not just here in Niagara West. It has made a significant difference in small wineries and the ability to pay for that extra person, to invest in new equipment and all those kinds of things. And we've seen wineries grow. I don't have the numbers here in front of me, but we've seen wineries grow literally from 200 or 300 across the country to literally almost in the hundreds and hundreds. Like, we've seen the growth of wineries 2, 3, 4 times, and this helped. It wasn't the only thing. I mean, obviously it's a pretty interesting, fascinating industry. It's something that drives people down to our region, which is what we want for tourism. You look at the culinary now. I mean, you think about what wineries have become in terms of restaurants and food offerings, all that kind of stuff. That's made a huge difference as well. And I'm very proud of that. That's one of the things that it's really helped the wine industry grow. I think that the wine industry in general, since we put that in place, has probably helped them to the tune of $400 or $500 million. Do you think of all the wineries spread over across the country being able to reinvest in equipment, and it's a tough business, right? I mean, wineries, we know wineries here. It seems sexy and glamorous, but you can't, depending on the
there's a lot of work.
It's labor, it's weather, and the list goes on.
People just see the tasting counters and think that that's it, but boy, there's a lot of work. If you
had a choice of being a winery owner or a winery visitor, take the visitor all the time. You get the best of both worlds. So and the list goes on. Like I said, there's been a lot of I worked with Nels Manor, for example. This is a local story. They were trying to get charitable status.
Yes, I recall that.
So they submitted the work, and we worked with them on that process. And you want to talk about a labor of love. I love what they've done there, and anyone to say we want to save history and we're going to donate I so much appreciate that. But
as the whole town should, quite
right?
honestly.
But the whole key piece to that was the charitable status. And they were having a hard time. We went back and forth a number of things. So we help literally hundreds of people like that in the riding all the time. When a senior comes to us and doesn't realize at 65 and they're now 70 that they could apply for GIS or OAS, guaranteed income supplement, for those that don't know what that is. OAS is old age security, and a number of these things. And then they end up with a check for $10,000 or $5,000, something they weren't expecting, because we help them figure that stuff out. We do tax clinics every year for seniors to help them out, and people that are maybe on fixed income. So maybe not seniors, but on fixed incomes. So we do a ton of community things to help people in the community. We work with people to get their families in through immigration. We work on a number of tax issues through CRA. The list goes on and on. And one of the greatest joys for me is being able to help all the literally thousands of people now over the years with a variety of things. The other thing I've always told our office, it doesn't matter what the issue is. If it's not our level of government, you always talk to people and we'll help them figure it out, right? People may come in. I remember a number of years ago, one of the things that someone came in and said, I need some help. I need help. We got a deaf child and we need a sign. I didn't know where to go, but they called my office. With them, I worked through the town. I think it was the town of Lincoln at the time. We actually got a sign up for them.
That Garden Gate or something else?
I think it was around there.
I've seen the sign, yes.
Yeah.
I know.
So
by the park.
But that's clearly not an area of responsibility. But obviously, they come to us and they actually think that we can help them. I'm not going to say, no, you go to the municipality. We actually will hold their hand, walk them through issues. And customer service has always been very important for me. I've been in business my whole life. That's so important. We don't turn people away. We try and work. We don't always get the result we want, but we do our best. The second story, which is a kind of a funny story, is that a number of years ago, I had a lady that, for whatever reason, on her Revenue Canada account, she'd been marked as deceased. For a year, she had tried to get this removed. So imagine if she's deceased, she's not getting her child benefit. There's just a whole list of things she's not getting because she's not alive. And I remember the time she was on the Roy Green show. Roy called me during the show and said, could you help fix this for this lady? And she'd already been trying. And no one would fix it was so simple. And what happened was I called, because we have access through a special MP, able to talk to people at CRA.
Yep.
And before the end of the show, I had literally brought this person back to life. That's what happened. So I joke on that, but it was simple as getting a box ticked. And she tried. She tried and wasn't able to do it. So anyways, it was something that was kind of cute as a story, but we get signs and we raise people from the dead. We do it all. So
very good. So just to sum up the way you choose, but why at this point in time should somebody in Niagara West vote for Dean Allison?
Well, one of the things that I've always believed in, it's an honor to have this job, and it's one of the things that I enjoy talking to people. I enjoy looking at people's issues, and I enjoy promoting the products of Niagara. At the end of the day, I am a huge champion for this region. I'm a huge champion for what we do here. It could be wine, it could be any number of things here. And I am so fiercely proud of Niagara West. And, I've worked very hard over the last 17 years helping individuals. That will never stop. I try and bring people into the region to look at trying to set up things, try and, get meetings together with business and government and all those things. I'll continue to be a broker in terms of trying to build those relationships, bring things here, and always being a champion for Niagara.
Very good. Thank you very much for your time today. Appreciate you coming in.
Thanks, and thanks for the opportunity.
All right. Thanks for watching, everybody.